Dear participants, eminent speaker Dr. Aniruddha Tongaonkar sir, my colleagues, a very good evening to all of you. I, Vinod Mishra, on behalf of Prisia Pharma, welcome you all for this nice webinar, which we are doing continuously. This is the 16th webinar which we are doing today with Dr. Aniruddha. Today's topic is very, very apt at the current scenario, is the managing diabetes in the current pandemic of COVID-19. I keep on telling again and again that while we all are safe at our home, there are thousands of doctors, nurses, paramedics, police. There are so many people who are working tirelessly day in and day out in this pandemic situation and saving our precious life within this difficult time. We salute all of them for their work, and as well as we precious salute their dedication towards the mankind. Today's our speaker is Dr. Aniruddha Tongaonkar sir from PCMC. Dr. Aniruddha Tongaonkar is MD Medicine. He is DNB Internal Medicine. He is a consultant physician based at PCMC. He is the founder director of Sterling Multi-Speciality Hospital, Nigri. And also he is a director and owner of Tongaonkar Clinic, Nigri. Sir, it's our honor and privilege to have you in this today's webinar. Sir, over to you to start the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vinod, for a lucid introduction. And at the outset, I thank Mr. Sanjay, Vinod, and all colleagues from Prisia Pharma for giving me opportunity for such an interesting topic on diabetes and COVID, which is the need of the time right now. Yeah, so today's our topic is managing diabetes in the current current pandemic of COVID 2019. This is the organism which has created havoc all over the world. Spike proteins on a circular organism, and that is coronavirus. Before I start, there are certain disclaimers. We have collected knowledge from WHO, ICMR, and various other published evidences. The discussion, which is based on non-authentic and unvalidated sources, is out of scope. There is a plethora of information, new information is every day pouring in regarding COVID. And the science is rapidly evolving, including the citation from the non-peer reviewed articles to be subject to the interpretation. Ultimately, whatever information is available, nothing really replaces the clinical judgments, and that's why clinical judgment reigns supreme over and over the content of this presentation. This online dissemination of scientific information is the new normal in the unprecedented scenario, with the intent to uniformly disseminate the medical information to enable the best standard of care and empowered clinical decision making. And in this evolving medical problem of COVID-19, we should all stay together and fight this infection. So the story actually started from this fellow. He's a doctor, a young doctor, an ophthalmologist. In the Wuhan, the city of Wuhan, Hubei province of China, which is the 7th largest city with some 11 million odd people over there, he started getting cases of unusual conjunctivitis, and he recognized it is as a viral conjunctivitis, and it was something similar to SARS, which has come before somewhere in 2002. And then he informed this condition to many of his colleagues, but probably he was taken quite lightly. But the cases keep on coming up. There was explosion of the cases, and soon it was informed to WHO. And not only that, the conjunctivitis was associated with cough, fever, and atypical pneumonitis. So this is the novel coronavirus. The picture that we are seeing. We are not new to coronaviruses. Coronaviruses usually cause common flu, cough, cold, fever, and few of them cause serious infections, basically which belong to beta type of coronaviruses. So this virus, which is shown on the upper left corner, it shows an envelope with spike proteins, and there is a single stranded RNA. You really cannot call this as an organism because there is no life in it. Once it enters a normal living cell, then only it starts activating. Predominantly symptoms are respiratory, cough and cold, and it causes this disease which is called as COVID. So the causative organism is novel coronavirus 2019 and the disease is called as COVID-19. Basically the coronaviruses, they belong to the family of Coronaviridae and subfamilies Orthocoronavirinae. There are 4 types of viruses: alpha, beta, gamma and delta. Usually the alpha viruses cause mild symptoms, and beta coronaviruses, few of them are turned out to be really dangerous. The first one was SARS, that is coronavirus beta, causing severe acute respiratory syndrome, that is SARS. Then came MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, and in 2019 it is novel coronavirus, which is causing pandemic all over the world. So as I said earlier, this gentleman ophthalmologist, he noticed the cases of conjunctivitis, which kept on increasing very rapidly, and it was associated with pneumonia also. So soon in late December 2019, WHO was informed of an outbreak of pneumonia of unknown cause in the Wuhan city of Hubei province in China. So the first cases which were reported were actually the stall holders in the wet market of this city of Wuhan. This actually wet market is known for the different types of animals, birds, snakes, lizards, sale of all these animals to the humans, and these are considered as delicacies in China. But then all these cases were linked to the sale in this particular seafood market, and that's why it was ultimately closed on Jan 1, 2020. Then the genetic sequencing of this particular virus was done, and it found out to be the beta coronavirus, but it had undergone different mutations to survive in this environment and causing zoonosis, that is infection from animals to humans. And then it has now undergone multiple mutations, and now the spread is occurring from human to human. So that's why this was labeled as a novel coronavirus, and since it was detected in 2019, it got its specific name of novel coronavirus 2019. The coronaviruses which have previously affected the human race, that is Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome virus, that is MERS and SARS. So the SARS was having mortality up to 10%, MERS was having up to 34%, and this novel coronavirus, it really doesn't appear to have mortality of that high, but still the pandemic is going on, and newer statistics are coming day by day, and we'll come to know the exact mortality rate at the end of this pandemic only. But right now, for time being, it seems to be a milder infection compared to SARS or MERS. What exactly the symptoms of this coronavirus infection? It was now confirmed that the incubation period is from 2 to 14 days. Basically comes as a fever, cough, cold. The significant factor is a dry cough, a dry irritating cough associated with mild breathlessness, that is dyspnea. Patients are, and this cough, cold, fever gets converted into pneumonia, which is a bilateral pneumonia. If patients are not treated, then they contract secondary bacterial infection. They are going into septicemia, multi-organ failures, and ultimately succumb to this particular infection. Newer and newer clinical manifestations of coronavirus infections are coming up. Some few patients are presenting only with GI symptoms, that is, maybe vomiting or diarrhea. There are certain skin manifestations in the form of purple chicken pox, chilblain, bruises. Some interesting symptoms like there is no rhinorrhea. Usually the running nose is not the feature of this particular infection. And loss of taste and loss of smell are considered quite characteristic feature of this infection. Few patients are coming up with unusual headache and dizziness also. But ultimately all these patients, they land up with severe type of pneumonitis, secondary bacterial infections, septicemia, and ultimately leading to death. When we compare diabetic patients and COVID, if you really compare our routine common cold, flu, and coronavirus infection, the incubation period, as I told, was between 2 to 14 days. Mostly cases are mild. Fever is a significant feature, which is a high-grade fever of more than 100 degrees. Running nose, sore throat are less common features. What actually attracts attention is a dry, irritating cough associated with difficulty in breathing. So that must be remembered. There is certain good news, those are coming up. There is no new country, new territory or area is involved by COVID in last 24 hours. And even from India, some few good news are coming, like Goa is bound to be declared as the first state which is corona-free. Northeast states in India are doing well. And few states, few districts are now falling into the green zone in India. They are soon will be the lockdown and everything will be released in these cases, in these areas. So good news is also pouring in. We are also receiving larger and larger number of PPE kits, that is personal protective equipments. A good news for the healthcare workers and doctors. So all is not gloomy as far as the COVID is concerned. As on today, there are more than 24 lakh people are involved, are infected by this infection, this coronavirus. More than 185 countries are involved. In India, the figures are also quite rising. More than 18,000 odd cases are there in India. 15,000 are active. In Maharashtra, we are crossed already 4,600 cases. Soon we'll be touching a figure of 5,000. And in India, the death figure is cross 600 marks. But the good news is that more than 3,500 odd patients have been cured of this disease also. So some good news, some is also coming in this gloomy period, which is there all over the world. Now we need to know about the few definitions. The first is the two terms they come commonly into the discussion. One is the surveillance case, and the next is the close contact. So if you really look at the case definition of SARI means severe acute respiratory infection. So this is a person with history of fever and cough which requires admission to the hospital. So who requires hospitalization, and no other etiology really fully explains the clinical presentation. With this, patient gives history of international travel in a period of 14 days, or disease occurs in a healthcare worker who has been working in an environment where patients of SARI are being cared for without regard to the place of residence or history of travel, or the person who develops an unusual or unexpected clinical course with sudden deterioration despite appropriate and adequate treatment without regard to the place of residence or history of travel, And even if another etiology has been identified, that fully explains the clinical presentation. And second person we call it as a case is a person with acute respiratory illness of any degree of severity within 14 days before the onset of illness had any of following exposures, either close physical contact with a confirmed case of COVID-19 infection while that patient was symptomatic, and a healthcare facility in a country where hospital-based COVID-19 infection patients have been reported. So this is what we call as a case of COVID-19. Now, what is close contact? So close contact is a person, healthcare person, associated exposure, including direct care for a diagnosed COVID-19 patients, working in healthcare workers infected with COVID-19, or visiting patients or staying in the same close environment of a COVID-19 patients. Second is working together in a close proximity or sharing the same classroom environment with a COVID-19 patient. Traveling together with a COVID-19 patient in any kind of conveyance. And that is what exactly is happening in the public nowadays. If the public transport starts and we start traveling in a person who's COVID-19 positive, it is going to create more concerns and more problem. And lastly, living in the same household as a COVID-19 patient. So all these category of persons are called as close contact. And this is the slide actually from a study in China, because no other country have still published any data regarding all these things. And this is a short study which included around 138 hospitalized patients. Look at the median age, which was around 56 to 75 and predominantly they were men. Second part is very important for us as doctors or healthcare workers. That means hospital-associated transmission was suspected as the presumed mechanism of infection for affected health professionals and hospitalized patients. So even whatever kind of or the quality of PPE we use, we must be still very careful about our hand hygiene and use of personal protective equipment, because still there is a very high chance of acquiring this infection. And when we are using personal protective equipment, we should not presume that we won't get infected from this virus. So it may give you the false sense of security. The common symptoms were basically fever, fatigue, dry cough, and nowadays myalgia is seen as a predominant feature. In the lab parameters, lymphopenia occurred in 97% of the patients, with prolonged prothrombin time in 58% of the patients, and also elevated LDH levels. If you really consider about the lymphopenia, the ratio of neutrophils to lymphocytes is also very important. If that ratio is more than 3.18 or 3.3, something like that, it is considered as a bad prognostic factor. The HRCT thorax of these patients showed bilateral patchy shadows or ground glass opacity in the lungs of all patients. These patients mostly received antiviral therapy in the form of oseltamivir, and certain other antibiotics were also tried, that is moxifloxacin, ceftriaxone, azithromycin, and few of them received steroids also. 36 patients were transferred to ICU because of complications out of 138 patients, and that complication was mainly ARDS. Few suffered from the cardiac emergencies in the form of arrhythmias, and 30% of the patients, they landed up with shock. And if you really look, the median time period that required from the first symptom to dyspnea was quite short, a quite rapidly developing disease. It hardly took 5 days for these patients to land up with severe dyspnea, ARDS, and go into the ICU. So somewhere between 5 to 7 days, and ARDS was observed in just 8 days. This is a typical CT scan picture of the coronavirus patients, COVID patients. So it shows typical multiple ground glass opacities in bilateral lungs. They are seen in the posterior segment of the right upper lobe, apical posterior segment of the left superior lobe. And if the image is seen after 3 days, it shows progression of these ground glass opacities in the segments that have been affected. And this typically it is bilateral presentation without subpleural sparing. So CT scan is far more important than just plain X-ray chest when you are dealing with the patients of COVID. So this is about the patients who were treated in the ICU and those who did not require ICU. So if you look at the comparative data, the patients who ultimately needed ICU were older, age more than somewhere between 60-65 years. They were having associated comorbidities in the form of maybe diabetes, hypertension, ischemic heart disease, or something else. They were more likely to have dyspnea and anorexia. So it was basically the severe dyspnea which took patients from ward into the ICU. Of the 36 cases in the ICU, they received high flow oxygen therapy. They also needed non-invasive ventilation, and some of them received invasive ventilation. About invasive ventilations, there are controversial reports. Initially, it was advised that the moment SpO2 starts falling down, you should go for elective intubation. But now there have been question marks.
वीडियो थोड़ा सा स्टील हो गया है सर. I think some network problem is there.
0.3%, so 6%, 6 of the persons died, and remaining patients are still hospitalized. So the presumed hospital-related transmission was suspected in 41% of the patients, and 26% of the patients needed ICU care, and mortality was around 4.3%. So if you really look at the mortality rates of SARS and MERS, that is 10% and 34%, still the mortality rate in the COVID-19 is far less. So if we really take all the protective measures, we could come out of this problem. So this is the carry-home message, what I feel. This is all about the protective measures that you are supposed to take against the coronaviruses. And it has been frequently told everywhere, like frequent washing of the hand, especially with the detergents and soap. When they are not available, especially when the hands are dirty, you should use them first with the water and then soap and water or detergent and water. If hands are clean, you are wearing gloves, then alcohol-based sanitizers are also enough. Then you have to use all these tissues and whatever mask ultimately into a closed container. You have to follow certain respiratory etiquettes, like you have to, while you are sneezing, coughing, better to cough and sneeze into your sleeves, and don't touch your sleeves, because once your hands will touch those sleeves and these hands are touching your face, the virus can get transmitted. So follow respiratory etiquettes, frequent washing of the hands, and avoid touching to your eyes, nose, and mouth. Keep social distance and avoid mass gathering, avoid crowded places. This is the standard things that we are now used to observe. This is all about the hand washing techniques. I think this is still very important. If you really follow this technique, that first rubbing the hands from palm to palm, then interdigital spaces should be cleaned, then fingertips should be cleaned, thumb should be separately cleaned. It really takes more than 20 seconds to follow these hand wash etiquettes and hand wash techniques, but that should be really followed properly, and then only it will give the desired result. So one must know as a doctor and healthcare worker as to how to take care of yourself and carry on the duty as a frontline worker. So you have to use all these personal protective measures and preventive measures. Avoid, and when you are coming from your clinic or hospital after visiting the patient, frequent washing of the hands, carry your own soap and own sanitizer is very important. If you are visiting or accompanying a suspected case to any health facility, make sure that you are using mask. Something that is very important regarding the mask, masks are of two types. One is the cloth mask and second is the surgical mask or the respirators. So respirators are very important. They should be selected properly. As a healthcare worker or as a doctor, one is supposed to use proper standard mask, that is N95 or N90 mask, and you have to make sure that those are issued and certified by proper authorities. Certain authorities are there like NISOH, National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NPPTL, that is National Personal Protective Quality and Laboratory. So they should be certified by these institutes, and then you use these masks. The mask should be actually snugly fitting your face, that is mouth and nose. When you are breathing in and out, you should feel the pressure inside the mask. They should not be loose fitting. Many times we see that the patients, there is a mask hanging in the neck and mouth and neck is mouth and nose is open. So mask should not be actually used like that. It should be properly used. And there is something regarding the reuse of these masks also. There are different types of masks. The N stands for non-oil proof, P stands for oil proof, and R type of masks, they are oil resistant masks. So we don't get those kind of masks. What we are using N95 and N90 masks are basically non-oil proof masks. So this is all about the mask. And what is most important is that how do you dispose these masks? So as a healthcare worker, as a doctor, we must dispose them properly following all biomedical waste guidelines. So in many of our clinics and hospitals, we are having our yellow dustbins and yellow bags. So these masks should be disposed in those bags or yellow dustbins. Since the masks are costly, they are sparse, they are not easily available, there is a tendency to reuse these masks. So certain techniques have been advised regarding the reuse of this N95 mask or N90 mask. Best is to purchase 4 masks, label them as 1, 2, 3, 4. So use masks 1 on day 1, 2 on day 2, 3 on day 3, and so on. And after 4 days, you again use the number 1 mask. So after a gap of almost 72 to 96 hours, you can reuse the first mask. And these masks should be properly kept in a plastic bag with ziplock so that the no dust enters the filter or doesn't affect the front portion of this mask, and so that it can be reused. Ultraviolet rays are also shown promising result in reusing the mask, in cleaning the mask. Ovens can be used up to 70 degrees, but this should be properly supervised, and make sure that by these techniques you can reuse the mask only 3 to 4 times and not more than that. Again, social distancing is the major issue. So if you are conducting community meetings or supporting some outreach sessions, the group should not be larger than 10 to 12 people. Maintaining safe distances, that means up to 3 to 6 feet. So at least minimum distance of 1 meter is must in crowd, and avoid crowded areas. Even then you should inform them about the preventive measures and support them as required. You must look for the signs of the illness among yourself. So self-monitoring of the signs of illness, cough, cold, any dry cough. Nowadays there is a tendency to hide these symptoms. So please don't hide. Report these symptoms, test yourself, and take the treatment also, so that you can get cured from this infection. At the same time, you stop preventing this infection to other people. Ensure that you continue to undertake tasks related to care of C. This is the class of people, they really need special attention, like pregnant women, newborns, sick children, postnatal care, breastfeeding and nursing women, and patients who are suffering from the severe diseases like tuberculosis. So they should be taken special care, and they should be taught about all these techniques. Even as the age increases, we are going to see in a few slides coming, as the age increases, the people are at higher risk. So older people are at higher risk. So when you are visiting the elderly people at homes, you must take special care. Also, continue to pay special attention to marginalize as in your routine practice. And as a healthcare worker, it is our role to reassure them, tell them the techniques to prevent the infection, tell them techniques to prevent the complications, and reassure them. So when we are dealing with the diabetes and COVID 2019, the problem that basically is, the crux is not that the diabetic people are more likely to contract infection than the normal people. But once they contract infection, they are likely to come out with the worst outcome. So that is the real concern. So people who already have diabetes related health problems, they will definitely have worse outcome compared to normal people. There is increased risk of diabetic ketoacidosis as well as hypoglycemia in these patients. And type 1 diabetic patients are more prone compared to type 2 diabetic patients. These viral infections, they also increase inflammation or tissue edema in people with diabetes. And as we all know, more the sugars are uncontrolled, more there is hyperglycemia, the infection is likely to be more severe, and both could contribute to more severe complications. So if the glucose control is poor, the severity of the viral illness and the risk of complications will increase because immunity is impaired. That's why it is very important that a diabetic patient should maintain a good glycemic control. Otherwise, also a diabetic patient should maintain a good glycemic control. But especially in the time of COVID, you must make sure that all your diabetic patients will have a good glycemic control. And that's why frequent monitoring of the blood glucose. See, now there is a lockdown period, patients cannot come to us. So it is our duty to promote glucometers, and also duty to promote self-SMBG, self-monitoring of blood glucose is very important, and good glycemic control will definitely lessen the chances of secondary bacterial infections. Then patients with diabetes and coexisting heart disease, kidney disease, they need special care, and it is our duty to stabilize their blood pressure, stabilize their renal status, and stabilize the other metabolic parameters. Nutrition and especially protein control is not less important. So all these patients, we promote the prescription of multivitamin tablets, especially vitamin C. Exercise is equally important to maintain the immunity. So you don't have to go for a very rigorous exercise, but 15 to 20 minutes of exercise which can be done on regular basis at home is very important. But under pretext of doing exercise, please avoid gymnasiums, gyms or swimming pools, avoid crowded places. Certain yoga, pranayam, surya namaskar and certain push-ups and dips are also enough to maintain your immunity. And it is important that we should take regularly the flu vaccines and pneumonia vaccines, so that it will prevent the serious complications once this COVID pandemic is going on. The population is generally susceptible to this coronavirus infection, and especially elderly and with comorbidities are more vulnerable. So we must keep in mind those things and keep check on the blood pressure and the sugar levels. So next is Basically, in a diabetic patient, the immunity level is low, and because of compromised innate immune response, the diabetic patient, they are more susceptible and more susceptible to the enhanced complications from SARS-CoV-2 infection. There is also much more potential to progress rapidly into ARDS, septic shock. So all these terminal complications are also more common in diabetic patients. And if there is a comorbidity like diabetes, you must expect that this patient will go into the ICU, and the chance is more in such patients. So compared to the patients who did not receive ICU care, ICU patients with virus infections are more likely to have underlying diabetes.
So internet issues, I think.
Is mortality. And the largest epidemiological investigation in China indicated that the mortality of diabetes was up to 7.3%, which is dramatically higher than, just see, look at this slide. If there are no pre-existing conditions, then the mortality is hardly 0.9%. And as the comorbidities keep on adding, like malignancies, hypertension, chronic respiratory disorder, diabetes, or cardiovascular diseases, it increases alarmingly to more than 10%. One, this is a significant study. If the lesser the age, less is the risk. So higher the age, more is the risk. So as seen in the slide, persons who are 80 plus, they are likely to land up with problem compared to the lesser age persons. And basically there is a tremendous stress nowadays. Infection, inflammation, it adds to the stress, and this stress, it releases the certain glucocorticoid hormones, catecholamines, which are causing hyperglycemia, and they are increasing the blood sugars, and that results in elevated blood glucose, abnormal glucose variability, and it adds to the diabetic complications. So this holds true for the OPD patients. Same thing holds true for the hospitalized patient. They need good glycemic control. Even this glycemic control is needed after discharge. So 4-week follow-up period, you should go for frequent monitoring of the blood glucose and make sure that there is a glycemic control and homeostasis. That means BP is also properly maintained even post-discharge. And long-term follow-up is essential for the diabetic patients to reduce the complications and mortality. How will you manage the diabetic patients and hypertensive patients, your cardiac patients in this era of lockdown? So since our patients are also quite well aware of WhatsApp, Facebook, they are using internet and smartphones, the work of telemedicine has increased, and we as a doctor also should get accustomed to this telemedicine. There are quite legal formalities, some educational material is available regarding the telemedicine. So it is our duty as a healthcare worker and doctor to get accustomed to this new system of telemedicine. And we try to, via that telemedicine, we should try to manage the diabetic and hypertensive status of our patients. There are certain educational videos and ebooks are also available. But everything that comes on WhatsApp and Facebook and social media is not always correct. So take it with a pinch of salt, confirm from your healthcare worker or doctor, and then only you can take advantage of this. To date, these online services and resources have played remarkable role, especially in China, but I think our country is no less and not behind China, and we are also now into this use of telemedicine. There are many unproven therapies. Newer and newer drugs are coming up like lopinavir, ritonavir, interferon 1B, then RNA polymerase inhibitor. But this remdesivir is recently found out to be a very useful molecule. Chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine have also been reported. One significant issue is regarding the use of ACE inhibitors in the time of this COVID, in this pandemic of COVID. Basically, this virus has a receptor binding site which is a strong affinity with ACE2 and inhibitors of renin-angiotensin, and it may have played a role in treating severe respiratory disease. So given recent finding that this coronavirus 2, it also attaches to ACE2 receptor, and there were controversial issues whether ACE2 inhibitors should be used in diabetes or ARB should be used in diabetes. But the current theory is that if the patient is well controlled on these ACE2 inhibitors or ARBs, then better to continue with the same drug. There is no need to change the drug and switch on to other molecules like CCBs or other drugs. But if the patient is freshly detected to have hypertension, then better to use CCBs as a first choice rather than going for ACE inhibitors. Zinc nanoparticles were shown to have inhibitory effects on H1N1 viral load, though their effect on COVID is still not known. And many cases and many unproven therapies are coming up in the treatment of COVID infection, like gargling with hot water, frequent drinking of tea and coffee, steam inhalation, and so on, or use of garlic, ginger, and those things. But I will tell that these are still unproven therapies and no documented evidence is there supporting these measures. So one important aspect of this current infection is that it has affected the mental health of medical workers. So basically, doctors and healthcare workers all over the world are facing enormous pressure. There is always high risk of acquiring infection. The PPEs are short, as we come to know. The quality of PPE is also not that good. So there is inadequate protection from contamination, overwork, frustration, and recently in India also we are facing this problem of discrimination and isolation. The moment people come to know that you are a doctor, you are a healthcare worker, you are discriminated. So discrimination, isolation, and many issues are coming up in the social media, and it all gives a negative feedback in the mind of healthcare worker and cluster of negative emotions. And also, since they are separated from their families, they sometimes feel mentally exhausted. So severe healthcare psychological problems in the form of stress, anxiety, depressive disorders, lack of sleep, anger, fear are coming up in the medical workers. So these medical health problems not only affect the medical workers' attention, understanding, and decision-making ability, but they will ultimately affect badly in a fight against this COVID infection, and they will ultimately affect the overall well-being of a person. So we should keep ourselves mentally strong. Society should help the medical workers in maintaining the mental status in fighting against this infection. So the take-home message, according to me, is that personal hygiene is very important. So frequent hand washing, use of mask, maintaining social distance, then following respiratory etiquettes when you are coughing, sneezing. You should follow all these respiratory etiquettes. At the same time, you should have good exercise, have good food to maintain your immunity, and keep a positive mental makeup. So basically, don't believe in the rumors. Whatever comes on social media is not always true. So most importantly, don't believe the rumors and don't spread the rumors also. So keep yourself in a positive state of mind. Stay home and stay healthy. Thank you.
Great, sir. It was wonderful. Can we stop the screen share so we can see the participant and take the question?
Yeah. I'll do that thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sir, at the outset, a big congratulations to you for such a wonderful and lucid deliberation and updated one. It was updated till now. I myself have 2-3 good questions, but let's take the questions from the audience now. I request audience to please go ahead and ask the question.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Please
Yes,
go ahead.
sir.
I am Dr. Muthia and I am an ophthalmologist. Dr. Anirudh, I have one question. Does the virus spread through tear film, tears?
It is when you actually rub your eyes, then the rubbing of the eyes, because following irritation, is shown one way of transmission of the infection. That is for sure. And if the virus droplets are there around your face, or if they are on your hand and you use the hand while rubbing of your eyes, then that can get transferred. But whether it is present in the tear film or not, I'm not very sure.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Just one more question, please. When we start our routine surgeries, do you think that before taking the surgical fitness, the rapid test will be one of the tests included in the pre-op
I
fitness?
think, yes. There was initially when the patients were screening for the COVID, there was stringent criteria from the government side that only IPD and admitted patients were allowed. But now, as the days are passing by, COVID patients are also allowed, and there is quite liberalization of the test. Even more and more test kits are available. So I would definitely advise that before surgery, the COVID test should be done in the patients, because nowadays even if you want to appear before the court, then the judge is saying that all the persons are coming in the court, they should be tested for the COVID. So why not the surgery patients? So it is better that we take care from our side, like HIV, like we do screening for HIV for all our operative patients. Better to do COVID in these patients. It will soon become mandatory.
It should be added to the list.
More and more test kits are also available. See, initially the fear was that if those who really need testing should undergo testing, and show that the test kits should not fall short when you want to really test these patients. But now, since the more and more test kits are made available, like my lab and few other labs are coming up with the kits, even private labs are now allowed to go for the COVID testing. I think it will be soon available, and we should go for the testing.
Okay, thank you.
Great, wonderful. Thanks for the question, doctor. Sir, Dr. Abhijit has a question. Dr. Abhijit, please go ahead.
I have one question. I mean, when it is a symptomatic patient or the person you see, it's reasonably easy to be away from such person and then take care. But I hear this a term called asymptomatic transmission. And what can you say about that?
See, that is the real fear, and that's what we call that when you are in stage 3. It is usually observed that 80 to 90% of the infection will occur from the symptomatic persons, and asymptomatic persons are responsible for around 10% of the transmission. But while the government and everyone has put guidelines in social distancing, is for the fear of this transmission from the asymptomatic persons only. So the best way is to observe social distancing, that is at least 1 meter distance, then observe hand hygiene, so frequent washing of the hand with the detergent or the soaps, and follow respiratory etiquettes. All these things will definitely prevent you from getting infected from even an asymptomatic person. So nowadays, basically the dictum is that consider all patients as COVID positive unless proved otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Isn't that very tough onto the day-to-day practice, sir? I mean,
yeah, surely. See, right now I'm carrying out OPD as if I'm going for a surgery. Though I have hardly visited an operation theater in my life, but I get prepared like that as if I have to undergo surgery, like use the mask and goggle and face shield and that gown and whatnot. So it really becomes very difficult. And the best way in running the OPDs is that what I've heard and what I observed is that what you wear and how meticulously you follow all these etiquettes is not important, but basically any person entering your hospital premises or clinic, his hand should be sanitized and that person should wear a mask. So at least the source, if at all that person is a source, then the droplets and fomite formation in your clinic and hospital premises gets tremendously reduced, and then your personal protective equipments are far more effective.
That's really. Yeah. The next question from the audience. Okay. Sir, how easily these personal protective equipments are available? Face shield and all that you are using. I mean, and where is it available?
See, the face shields, initially there was scarcity and regarding the availability of these personal protective equipments, but now many people and many companies are coming up with the production of these personal protective equipments. I have that information available. I might share you with the contact details and everything. Good quality face shields, even good quality gowns, gloves, goggles, everything is now available.
Great.
But only thing is that we need to use them judiciously in the sense that if you really use them properly and properly keep them, you can use them more frequently. Actually, no one advises to the reuse of personal protective equipment. Not even N95 masks. See, WHO and all those standard organizations won't recommend the reuse of personal protective equipment. That is for sure.
This is single use.
Single use. But we have to find out the practical solutions for all these personal protective equipments. That's what I said. Naki, you can keep those masks in a Ziploc plastic bag and use 4 masks. So day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and again on day 5 you can use the day 1 mask. When it is untouched for 96 hours, more than 4 days, virus doesn't remain active on the surface, and you can reuse those.
Oh, great.
That is the simple principle on which it works.
Wow, wow, very informative, sir. Dr.
Hello.
Abhijit has one more question. Yeah,
Hello.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, madam.
I have one question. That if suppose that just before a delivery, 1 week before delivery, if mother test COVID positive, how much are the chances that the baby will have the COVID-19?
Recently, there is a one case report from US where the 2-day-old baby has come positive for COVID. But it is not actually, you cannot call it as a vertical transmission from mother to fetus. It may be more likely to be circumstantial, or environmental issues are responsible for making that baby positive. And when the questions of breastfeeding and other nursing care come, you have to follow, because nursing mother or lactating mother, it comes under a comorbid condition. So it is a high risk, she becomes a high risk case. So you have to take all the necessary precautions to make sure that she doesn't carry that infection to the baby.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka, for the question. Dr. Abhijit also wants to add something, I suppose. Dr. Abhijit, please go on.
So simple question, Doctor. One is that, okay, the N95 masks or any of these masks are preferentially for the healthcare workers. The normal patients, while they can get it, may not really get it because they are little scared. So there is another statement that is made that, okay, you can make masks out of your handkerchiefs or anything like that. The question is that, are those as effective? Would you advise, not advise?
See, that's what I was talking about, the social media. Ki whatever is shown on the WhatsApp and Facebook is not necessarily correct. Basically, cloth masks are not recommended by WHO. They carry no value. Only thing is that if you are suffering from upper respiratory tract infection, you have cough, cold, sneezing, that will definitely act as a mechanical barrier for the droplets to come into the environment. So in that sense, those are useful. If you are suffering from infection, then the cloth mask or whatever the standard cloth mask we see in the public, they are quite useful for that purpose. But as a healthcare worker or as a doctor, you want to attend a patient, then those masks are not at all protected. That is for sure. See, surgical triple filter, those flyer masks, they are quite useful, or you have to go for N95 mask if you want real protection from the virus. And again, I am telling you, even in those cases, keep social distance. Don't use your stethoscope or don't touch the patient if it is really not going to make a difference in the treatment. So you are supposed to go near to the patient and touch the patient and auscultate him only if it is likely to make any difference to the patient. But that holds true for certain branches. Certain branches like ophthalmology, dentistry, ENT, where they have to go to very near to the patient. I think those people, those faculty persons, they doctors, they should take more care and they should be more careful about when they are examining the patients in their OPD or hospitalized.
Great. I think this is what you were talking about, more interactive and this thing.
Yes, yes, yes. So,
Dr. Vinayak wants to ask the question, sir. Yes, Dr. Vinayak, please go ahead. Yes, doctor. Yeah, please unmute. I will just unmute you. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, please speak.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
sure.
yes, very loud and clear.
Yeah, I was little late because I was in the OPD, but I don't know about the any other presentation other than respiratory. I think skin manifestation and GI manifestations are quite common percentage wise.
Yeah.
In the Indian scenario, is there any list or percentage wise presentation?
Clinical presentation, yeah. In the clinical symptoms, no or less rhinorrhea, less running nose. Second is loss of taste and smell. Is characteristically coming up as a suspicious symptom, and few people have experienced headache and dizziness also.
No, this skin and GI, how much percentage skin and GI they have noticed in our patients? Any
I think if
idea?
any dermatologist is there in the group, he can contribute to this information. But basically, all the chilblain or purple chickenpox and those.
Yeah, as in like viral infection.
European countries, especially France and Spain. I don't know about the Indian scenario.
So more and more number of data will come from our patient will come to know. Because
yes,
it was in Italy, there were around 15 or 17% skin manifestation, patients having skin manifestation along with the respiratory or GI.
Okay. Sir, you are looking like an astronaut, ready to go into the space.
Nowadays, all will look like astronauts.
And sweating from inside. That is horrible.
Great. Okay, we have almost 50 doctors. Dr. Prithviraj Chauhan is there. I think a wonderful audience. Dr. Prithviraj, would you like to add something, sir? Dr. Vikas is there. Please go ahead. I think there's a wonderful platform. And we have the very intelligent guys on the panel. I request people to just open up. So,
I have a question actually.
Yeah, please go ahead.
As you know, the rapid testing are coming.
Yeah.
And they are recommended by the ICMR. What do you see the role of rapid testing in future for all these patients, for mass testing, for pre-operative testing and all these things?
So basically, since the government has released the restrictions over the testing, and it is promoting more and more number of tests have been carried out. If you really look when this pandemic started, there were quite stringent rules as to for the testing. And see, 30-40 days down the line, we are doing more and more tests in India. So tests have become easily available. And so soon this will become a routine thing. Basically, the IgM antibodies are detected 5 to 7 days from the onset of infection. And they are seen till 21 days, whereas IgG starts arising from the 14 days onwards, second week onwards, and it lasts for a quite few months afterwards. So you have to think when you want to interpret these tests, really you have to look into this formation of antibodies and their duration till which they last. In doubtful cases, if you really want to know whether this is an active case or not, then I think RT-PCR only confirms the diagnosis. So if RT-PCR comes positive, that means that is an active case. So RT-PCR and IgM is positive, that indicates the active case. If IgG is positive, you can label it as a COVID positive. But if RT-PCR comes negative, then that is not actually the active case. I think Dr. Vikas Mandlekar is a renowned pathologist. In fact, he can throw more light on this particular interpretation of the lab test.
As
Yeah,
you
Dr.
said,
Vikas, would you like to add, sir? Yeah.
as you said, it is right. You have said rightly. The rapid tests are coming in future in market in recent future, but they are just for the screening. They will be considered as screening tests. They are not confirmatory tests. When you find IgM positive, that is the IgM comes positive after 7 days only, 7 to 8 days back. And if they comes positive, they will have to confirm the test with RT-PCR for to say the patient has COVID positive. These usually, I think, these will be screening tests only in the market.
Okay. So, since sir, you are from that field, I would also like to know, during the lecture, Dr. Tongaonkar said that now tests are available from the private player. Are they really easily available and accessible to the people at large?
Which test?
From private sector, I mean private labs, they are doing the testing for COVID-19. How easily they are accessible for the private? Suppose we want to do all our society watchmen, to get it tested. How easily available it is?
So as per the guidelines of ICMR, you cannot test RT-PCR on each and every individual which you want. There are some guidelines given by the ICMR on which patients or which person you can do the test. As the number of tests are not that much available and they are needed for the really needed for the patients who really want to who they want to diagnose the case, then only they can do it. As per the guidelines of ICMR, we cannot do it as per our wish.
Okay. So it has to be referred by the doctor on the serious some symptoms or them.
Yes,
Then only
it has
patient can
to be referred by the doctor.
Okay.
It has to be referred by the doctors.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vikas. Dr. Tongaonkar, you want to say something on this?
Yeah, what actually Dr. Vikas is our main pathologist for the Sterling Multi-Speciality Hospital. So whatever he's talking is absolutely right. Only thing is that I pray that more and number of these test kits will be available and we should be able to screen from our OPD also. So if that scene comes, that is better for us. That will increase the sense of security during our practice for us.
Sir, आपने during lecture you said that कि अच्छा have a good food which increase the immunity. Are you indicating towards certain food or certain kind of items into the daily routine?
Yeah, routinely see as our diet is basically, as an Indian, we are rich in carbohydrate diet. Proteins actually give the immunity, and so the protein should be increased in the diet. It is very easy for the non-vegetarian persons. For vegetarians, the source basically is a milk, paneer, and dals and cereals. So they should be actively increased. You should have a good, anyway, since we are there in the lockdown. So we are all having homemade food. So like no hotel food or nothing like that. So that has really improved the diet pattern among many people nowadays. And that is one reason why we are seeing less patients is also they claim good food. So good food, rest, exercise, and peace of mind will all improve the immunity in a person. Certain foods are like in Ayush, doctors they many times prescribe like even turmeric, curcumin, and these kind of stuff. They really improve ginger, garlic, is certain spices. They do act as an immune booster. Many tablets are also available. So certain multivitamin tablets, vitamin C is a good immune boosters. On top of that, light exercise, good rest, and food. Everything will improve your immunity.
Okay, great.
Sir, one question.
Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, as you said, in COVID, 80% patients are asymptomatic.
Yeah.
So, do you recommend testing of COVID in each and every patient, even if he visits to our clinics for any damn disease?
I think that many test kits are not available in the country, and that's why government has restricted the use of test kits, because if you start using them right and left, then those who really need won't get the test kits won't be available for them. This is the first issue. Second is the costing of the test. So does that really fit into your cost? See, patient is undergoing certain surgery or patient is getting hospitalized, then the total bill amount will be okay enough that you can justify the testing for the COVID. But if the patient has come to you for OPD consultation, then the costing of the COVID test itself is too high compared to your consultation.
But any disease, the prognosis will be bad if the patient is COVID positive.
Not necessarily. That's what I'm saying. That's why this person is 80, 70, 82% our patient are asymptomatic, and it is a self-limiting disease, and they are coming out of that also properly. With just simple, see, anyway, there is no remedy for coronavirus as such. Like that patient has to be on antiviral drug or something like that. See, what is basic thing is that support the nutrition, supportive care, rest, and diet. So that only is taking patients out. These all antiretroviral drugs are useful only if patient gets hospitalized. See, we are not prescribing ritonavir or lopinavir or remdesivir on OPD basis.
Okay.
Hospitalized patient, it is justified. I don't think OPD patient, it is a justified test.
So you recommend testing for each and every admission, irrespective of the disease what he has.
Preferably, if that is suspected, if the patient has the clinical symptoms we have discussed, the patient has mainly come for fever and respiratory symptoms. Patient has come for unexplained diarrhea. Patient has come with certain skin manifestations, or patient has come up with dizziness, headache of unexplained origin. If there is a strong clinical suspicion, then you should not stop from getting done COVID in such patients.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prithviraj Chauhan, sir. Thank you very much for that. I think we have a extended session, and this is the current topic, so obviously there would be many questions. So before we close, a couple of questions if we want to take, I request, or maybe addition also, not only questions.
Yeah,
I mean, as Dr. Tongaonkar said, people have the experiences, as Dr. Vinayak was asking and sharing. So is there anyone who would like to share?
Okay. But it was really a great platform, Sanjay.
Yeah.
Really quite interactive session after the main lecture. And
sir,
yes, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, Dr. Vikas, go ahead, please.
I would just like to thank Dr. Anirudh. He has explained and covered the topic very nicely, right from personal hygiene up to the diabetes and to the complications of diabetes in COVID. So it was explained very nicely and very thoroughly. And thank you for that, Anirudh.
Thank you.
We'll come back.
Yes.
See you again. Thank you very much.
He is always the champion, plays on the front foot. I have seen him.
Yeah,
so this time also he said we must do something like this. Dr. Tongaonkar, it was really pleasure always whenever I meet you, whenever I talk you, your charm is always there, is cast the spell. And it's eventful that this meeting was to be very, very good. So thank you very much. I express my sincere gratitude to my colleague, everybody, including Suhas Pandey, Prashant Kulkarni, my colleague from marketing, Vinod, and without audience, no program succeeds. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks.
I want to thank Dr. Tongaonkar. Thank you so much, sir. It was such a nice elaboration, and you have made the subject so simple and nicely elaborated. Very, very practical it was. Thank you so much. I think it will be beneficial for all of us to take care in this COVID-19 issue.
अगर आप सब लोग चाहो तो मेरे पास एक टूल है. We can do the quick poll. it will take not more than 1 minute or 30 seconds. Shall I go ahead?
Yes, sure.
आपको खाली एक बटन दबाना है आपके फोन पे या लैपटॉप पे. So I am launching one poll. The question is, when do you think COVID-19 issues will get over? And it's a multiple choice question. 31st May 2020, 30th June 2020, 31st December 2020, and can't say. The poll has been launched. You can take the poll. We will just run it for 60 seconds. I request everyone to do the polling. So it's a 10-second. Great. Okay. Wow. So far 50% are saying can't say. It's a 22 seconds now. Please participate as many as you can into the poll. Wonderful. 25 out of 50 people are attempting. Very good. I request everyone. It's the easy one. Easy one means it's a not easy one, but I think you can give a try to it. Now the poll is tilting towards 30th June 2020. We have last 10 seconds to go. So, okay, great. So we have last 3 seconds. Great. So now let me tell you the poll result. 41% people says that it will end by 30th June. 10% says 31st May. 17% say 31st December. And Sterling 31% say can't say. So this is the poll.
Good one.
After 16 webinars, this is the first webinar where you have taken the poll. I hope you have enjoyed this small, tinkling at the end of it. Thank you very much, sir.
Surely. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you, sir.
Yes. Surely.